Hello, welcome for this new video on the Vijnana Bhairava Tantra. Today we shall continue the series of verses that teach practices about the world and practices of dissolution or resorption of the world, or of the world rolling back into its cause, Shiva. So verses 55, 56 and 57. The first one, the verse 55, is a little bit like an interjection, a digression, or so it looks at first sight, for it doesn't seem to speak about the world, but rather about breath and possibly about dream. Om pināṃ ca durbalāṃ śaktiṃ dhyātvā dvādaśagocare praviśya hṛdaye dhyāyan muktaḥ svapna-svātantryam āpnuyāt. And there the last pada, the last quarter of the verse, has an alternate reading. Svapna-svātantryam āpnuyāt. So either it can mean freed, the adept, the yogi, the yogini, reaches absolute freedom, or she reaches freedom in dreams, with regard to dreaming. So supposedly like lucid dreaming. For in tantric Buddhism we have quite detailed practices of lucid dreaming. But anyway, what it says first is pināṃ ca. So it starts with a cha, as if it was the continuation of something else, because I don't see the continuity with the previous verse, which was speaking about a gradual dissolution of grosser levels of being into subtler ones. Pināṃ ca durbalāṃ śaktiṃ dhyātvā. One should first contemplate. So dhyāna is usually to visualize in tantric context, to visualize a deity, his body, with the arms, the colors, and the attributes, and so on. But here it regards it concerns the breath, the vital energy. Dhyātvā, having contemplated the shakti, supposedly the prana shakti, the vital energy, which is pināṃ, pivaram, which is gross, thick, long, durbalāṃ, deprived of strength, weak. So the cha here can mean that she is both thick and deprived of strength. So according to the commentary, because what does that mean? A breath that is thick and weak. It means that gradually prana shaktiṃ ādau pīnaṃ. So first, it would mean that first she is thick, gross, and then kramena, tataha kramena, then gradually durbalāṃ bhaveta, she will become weak, that is kriṣam, that is slim, one that is itself closed by sūkṣmam bhavantim. She will become faint, subtle. And then on what, where should we contemplate that vital energy, that breath power? Dvādaśagocare, in the space of 12 finger width, 12 finger breadth above the top of the head, above the top of the head. So the dvādashanta, the end of the 12. Dvādaśagocare, the field literally, that is at 12 finger breadth. So here the practice becomes very clear. In fact, what we have here is just another instance of the very important tantric yoga practice of projecting one's attention at the end of exhalation, of the exhale movement, of the out breath. The out breath is physically out of the nose, but subtly it is in the space above the top of the head. Something like 20 centimeters above the top of the head. So here what we should do is to put our attention at the end of the exhalation, that is, in the space above the head. Once more, that practice we find here. So important practice, especially in Kaula teachings, we find it each and every time, everywhere, and detailed with the whole symbolism, and really the teachings stress that practice. It seems to be at the core of it, and Abhinavagupta gives very detailed prescriptions for it in the chapter 6 of his Tantra Loka, the path of time, Kaladva. And here he gives to it the support of a very detailed visualization, projection onto it, on those breath cycles, in breath, out breath, of the cycles of time. 1 minute, 1 hour, 1 day, one lunar cycle, 1 year, etc., and to eternity. So this is really, one cannot stress enough how that practice is important. Putting one's attention on the out breath, and especially at the end of the out breath. This is a central path, the path of the breath, really the kaladva is pranadva. And time and breath are interdependent, they support each other. So in order to go beyond time, kalatita, and to kill time, which is death, kalantaka, mrityu marana, one should practice listening to breath. While one listens to that end of the exhalation of the out breath, that moment of peace, that letting go, well, the movements of breath, everyone can check that for himself or herself. The movements of in-breath and out-breath will become more and more subtle, more and more faint. Krisham, sūkṣmaparasthityā, prana śaktiṃ. the energy of breath will become more and more subtle. This is just a fact that everyone can see for oneself. Pīnaṃ ca durbalāṃ śaktiṃ dvādaśagocare. Having meditated, having observed the energy of the breath, which is the breath in at the end of the out breath, which is first grows and then becomes more and more subtle. This is the meaning of that first line. Praviśya hṛdaye dhyāyan, and having also contemplated, same verb, dhyātvā, having contemplated, dhyāyan, and then contemplating. In the heart, that is the other end of the path of the breath. The end of the out breath is the dvādaśagocare, and the beginning or the end of the in breath in the lungs is the heart center. Hṛdaye, praviśya, having entered there. So one should contemplate the end of the out breath, the space above the head, and the end of the in breath, the space in the heart. So the beginning and end of the movement of breath. As I said before, all the practices of tantric yoga can be summed up in that way: observing, feeling the beginning or the end of any movement. Observing or feeling the beginning or the end of any movement. Breath, speech, thought, physical movement. That is really the core of the Shaiva tantric yogas, of the tantric practices. They can, all of them, be gathered under those two headings: feeling deeply the beginning of any movement or the end of any movement. Those are really the two main practices, and they can be practiced together. So, having contemplated the end of the movement of out breath, dvādaśagocare, above the head, at the end of the out breath, and having contemplated the end of the in breath in the heart, muktaḥ, free, he or she shall reach āpnuyāt, svapna-svātantryam, very important word in Kashmir Shaivism, maybe the most important of all. The freedom. Consciousness is free, but not free only in a negative way, like free from samsara, free from the mind, free from duality, but also in a positive way. It is free to act. It is free to create. It is free to choose. It is free for kalpayati, kalpitum, arhati. It is free to build everything and to vikalpitum, to divide, to choose, to exclude in apoha, which is really the key to the Shaiva, the Kashmiri Shaiva explanation of how consciousness directly, here and now, directly from every individual consciousness, creates the whole field of experience through the deities of the body and the mind. Verse 56. Om bhuvanādhvādirūpeṇa cintayet kramaśo khilam sthūlasūkṣmaparasthityā yāvad ante manolayaḥ. Here again we have a very simplified practice of dissolving the grosser levels of the world into the subtler levels. So we're coming back into our series of practices about the world. But maybe the previous verse, the 55, was inserted there willingly in order to bring back to mind and to stress again the importance of the practice of breath, which is really the hard practice, the root, the basic practice, the grounding practice, the introducing practice, and maybe the whole practice of tantric yoga and especially of Kaula yoga. So one should cintayet, one should visualize, one should meditate, just like in the English language. One should meditate, one should think of gradually, kramaśo, khilam, the whole world, bhuvanādhvādirūpeṇa, in the form of the path of the worlds, etc. I will explain. Sthūlasūkṣmaparasthityā, in the state, each one in their state of gross, subtle, and supreme. Yāvad ante, until in the end, manolayaḥ, attention in the mind, the individual attention dissolves completely back into universal infinite awareness, whole awareness. The whole dissolves back into whole awareness. That's the main idea. And how do I do that? Through a gradual dissolution of the levels, the grosser levels, into the more subtle ones. So again, here that practice is alluding to the scheme of the 36 levels of being, or the 36 elements of reality, of all experience, the 36 levels of being, śaktiṃ. So they are visualized in a special form of the dhyātvā, the sixth path, the so-called sixth path. This is one of the oldest, conceptual tool in Shaivism. Dual, non-dual, old, less old. It's one of the oldest. It's a tool that we find in all the Shaiva rituals of initiation, especially. So the six paths are divided into two. This is what the commentary here is explaining. It is interesting that he feels the need to explain it in details. It shows that maybe in that time already, in the 18th century, those teachings, those basic teachings, were not so clear any longer. So he felt the need to go into more detail, to lesson his students about it. So the six paths are divided into two. There is the path of the vācaka, the signifier, and the vācya, the signified. Because all that description of the word is grounded into the idea that everything is word, vāk. Everything is word. Divided into vācaka, that which expresses, vācaka, the signifier, words, in other words, and on the other hand, that which is expressed, the signified, the meanings, the things, vācya, artha, Shabda artha, the words and the things they point at, like apple and the thing itself, the apple itself. So everything can be divided into those two categories, padartha. And padartha means, by the way, once more, word and meanings. It's another way in Sanskrit to say, to mean things generally, in the most general way. So, padartha, shabdartha, vācaka, vācya, the signifier and the signified, like the word apple and the thing itself, the apple itself. So everything can be divided into those two sides. And one side, the signifier side, is the subjective side, the subject side, the inner side. It is the side of consciousness, of awareness, the David, the Shakti, the goddess side. The goddess is that. She is Vimarsha, Vācaka Vimarsha. She is consciousness of this and that. She is the consciousness, she is the awareness, and she is also the desire to perceive. She is perception, she is judgment, she is thought, she is awareness of this and that, of the apple, of the pot, of the cloth, etc., of yellow, blue, and so on. Whatever it is, inside or outside, real or not. She is Vācaka, she is Vimarsha. She is the process of becoming aware of this, of that, inside, outside, real or not, whatever, everything. And at the other end of the knowing process, there is the Vācya, which is being, which is Shiva, the God, which is that which is expressed, the object side, the objective side, whether it is private or common, whether it is objective or subjective, whether it is real or not, imaginary or real that is seen, seeable by everyone, doesn't matter. So they are inseparable, those two sides. The subject side, the awareness of the thing, and the thing which is awared. The subjective side, the objective side. Those are Shakti and Shiva. The subject side is Shakti, the object side is Shiva, Prakasha, that the manifestation, that all the things in experience. So they cannot be separated really, because the one is never without the other. They are always united together into some kind of relation. Shiva and Shakti are always in some kind of relation. The subject and the object are always into some kind of relationship. And through that relationship, everything takes place, is created and destroyed, and created and destroyed again, and so on and so on. So Shiva and Shakti create everything through their union. That is the experiential meaning of the Shaiva myth of Shiva and Shakti. And they cannot be separated. Just like thought and being, according to Parmenides, they are the same. They always correspond to each other. When awareness is fragmented, the world, the objects, are fragmented. Being is fragmented. And so we find 3 levels on every side, total 6. On the subjective side, we have we have syllables, words, and phrases, sentences. So it is a process of fragmentation, of manifestation and differentiation. Fragmentation of the words, of language, the subjective side. Because to be aware of is to say, is the same. In that thought is the same. To say something and to be aware of it is the same. And on the objective side, We have also a process of manifestation and fragmentation, differentiation. The level of the divisions, kala, then the 36 tattvas, the 36 levels of being that I mentioned before, and then the level of the worlds proper. In Abhinavagupta's teaching, there are 118 of those, from the highest worlds, the divine worlds, to the lowest hells. You remember in Brahmanda, in one of those huge sphere made of gold, inside of which you have all the levels, like kind of pizzas, and the middle one being our worldly earth. So all that we dissolve back, the grosser ones into the more subtle ones, like the 5 elements, the earth dissolving into water, water into fire, fire into air, air into space. Then those 5 elements, they dissolve back into the 5 organs of actions, the organs of actions like the hands, the feet, etc., the speech. They dissolve into the organs of knowledge. The organs of knowledge, they dissolve back into the mind in the ego into the intellect, if I remember well, the intellect into prakriti, the primordial nature, which here means something like chitta, which means the subconscious, which is something which is very much like the alaya Vijnana of the yogachari, which is like the sum total of all latent traces of all habits, vasana, sanskara. So all the unconscious, subconscious habits, the traces, the memories, and then that dissolves into the limited consciousness, in individual consciousness, but in a pure abstract state, purusha. Then that dissolves back into more or less maya, and then you cross the important border into the awakened state, into pure knowledge, Shuddha Vidya, then into Ishvara, then into Sadashiva, and then into Shakti, then into Shiva, and then you reach Bhairava, the absolute state. But that is quite complex and not very interesting for our purpose. And here he explains, basing himself, the commentator Shivopadhyaya, basing himself on a quote from the Swachanda Tantra. So, and then he gives a summary, in fact, of a passage, and he ends with another quote. And the goal of all that practice is to reach Shiva, God, the Absolute. Advatito bhavet Shiva. She will, the adept, the yogi, will become Shiva, beyond all those 6 paths, beyond the object and the subject, beyond all those manifestations. It is a transcending way, a way of going beyond, above. So it's like in the previous practice with the breath going above the body, which is the individual microcosmic Brahmanda, microcosmic egg sphere of Brahma. And here we go above all that again, just it's the same movement, I would say, but presented in a different way through different traditional tools. In the previous verse, it was more like a yogic practice based on breath. Here it's more a conceptual tool based on the rituals of initiation. Verse 57. Omasya sarvasya vishvasya paryanteshu samantataha adva prakriyaya tattvam shaivam dhyātvā manolayaḥ. Here again it is another verse describing essentially the same practice of the 6th path and dissolving back the gross into the subtle, into the supreme. the supreme being Shiva. So, dhyātvā, one should, again, the same word, one should contemplate through the path, through the practice, through the tool, through the device, prakriya, of the sixth path, that whole universe, asya sarvasya vishvasya, that whole world, that whole universe, paryantishu, until its end, samantataha, completely, without leaving anything apart. And at the end, one should visualize, one should contemplate tattvam shaivam, the supreme level, which is Shiva. And then manolayaḥ bhavet, the great awakening, the great manifestation, the total manifestation will happen, the highest. Usually here, maha does not mean just great. Maha means great, literally. But here, it means usually the most comprehensive. Like Mahananda means the type of bliss which is including all other types of bliss, the lower types of bliss, the more partial types of bliss. So it means complete bliss, all comprehensive bliss, not just great. Great in the sense of including all lower types of the thing mentioned after Maha, after great. So here we have again a longer commentary with a quote from the Karmakanda Kramavali, which is, as it names tells us, a manual for ritual practices. And it's again describing those process of dissolution, alluding to the ritual processes, ritual procedures. Those are quite complex, and they appeal to a knowledge of ritual. And that ritual, basically, the samaya diksha, the main initiation, the main Shaiva tantric initiation, is quite complex. It's supposed to last something like 3 days, and it's very long and complex, and it's full of symbols and processes, vidhi. And so I will not enter into details, and maybe I will do another video especially on that topic, describing that ritual, because we are lucky to have in French language the main, perhaps the most detailed ritual manual translated into French, the Soma Shambhu Paddhati. And just the part about initiation is really, really huge. So I will maybe make a video about that. But you see here, it's not so important, because here that text takes takes those practices, those ritual practices, very complex, very complicated, very detailed, very long, and it wants to take the gist of it, the essence, the quintessence of it. And it alludes to people who would know that, but it does not require a complete knowledge of it, because it enjoins a simplified version of it. But of course it would be interesting, but it's more a matter of curiosity to have some knowledge of those advani, and of those rituals. So I will maybe come back to that later on. But that's all for today. Thank you for listening. Have a good day and see you next time.